thank you all for being with me today. My name is Dr. Saliha Afridi. I am a clinical psychologist and the managing director of the Lighthouse Arabia, which is a mental health and wellness clinic in the UAE, in Dubai. And I'm going to be with you guys today for the next hour. The first bit of it is going to be us speaking about values. Then I'd like to move into speaking about a specific value of generosity. And then I'd like us to move into what is it that you can do in order to be a more generous person. Now, this is a campaign this is a national campaign for mental health, and the UAE Ministry of Happiness has actually extended this. We've been sort of part of this campaign for the last 30 days, and now we're going to be extending it for the next 30 days. And so I will be part of this campaign, and I will be with you every Monday, every Monday at 5 p.m. Speaking about values, because I see this as such an essential part of authentic happiness, and I'll tell you in a second why. And so every Monday at 5 p.m. for the next couple weeks, so this is the first week and we'll do 3 of these in a row, I'll actually be talking about values and how important it is to live a life of values in order for you to have authentic happiness. And then and this just really just shows the importance mental health has to Dubai, to the UAE government in itself. And so I happen to be a part of this campaign, and I'm so privileged and I'm so honored to be with you guys today. So thank you all for being with me, and so let's get started. So why are we talking about values? This is about happiness. Why are we talking about values? So the way we usually think about happiness is a very hedonistic way of us, sort of us imagining what happiness looks like. If I go here, I will be able to be happy. If I get this degree, or if I get this amount of money in my bank, or if I travel to this location, or if I get this job, this is kind of this, if-then type of relationship that we have with happiness. However, we know from science, and we know from psychology, we know from positive psychology, that positive feelings that are alienated from you being able to exercise your values and your virtues, you are going to continue to feel sad, you're going to continue to feel empty. And this is something that I see in my practice a lot. I see a lot of 40-year-olds or, maybe 35 and above, and they come and they say, I have everything. I'm married, I have a wife, I have a husband, I have money, I'm able to travel, I'm able to buy anything I want, I'm able to do anything I want, and I'm still unhappy. And that's because they're usually living a life that is outside of their value system or outside of their character strengths and virtues. And I will on my Instagram account, on my personal Instagram account, share with you a values inventory that you can take so you can understand what your personal character strengths are and what your personal values are. So it will be a list of values, and you'll see on the top what are your strengths, and then at the bottom you'll see all the things that you need to work on. This does not make you a bad person, it does not make you a horrible person, it just makes you a person that needs to work on something, which makes you human, okay? So that's what the importance of values is. So the happiness formula, by the way, for those of you who are looking, the authentic value, happiness comes from a 3-part formula. The 3-part formula includes 1, a life of pleasure, a life where you are exercising your greatest strengths and your virtues, and number 3, a life of meaning. This is what happiness actually looks like. It actually does not involve travel and all of these other things only. Now, the life of pleasure does involve all the good things, the good life. This is when we go out to eat and we travel and we do all the things, and we have all the money and we have all the stuff. Yes, it's important for us to feel that we are living a pleasurable life, whatever that means for you. For the artist, it means that they get to paint, and for another person, it might mean something else. So what does the life of pleasure mean for you? Do you have a life of pleasure? Number 2, it's a life, it's called the good life, okay? The good life is when you actually are engaging in something that is meaningful to you all day, every day. So I've actually taken the values inventory, and in that values inventory, it came out that I really am a very curious person, which got me in a lot of trouble, but nevertheless, I'm a very curious person and I love learning. So if you leave me with my books in a cave for the next few months, I probably will be okay, because this is just kind of what I engage in. However, being a psychologist, I get to listen to people's stories, I get to listen to people's lives, and that also keeps me very engaged. So what are you spending your day all day on? And that needs to be something related to your character strength and your virtue and your values, okay? Number 3 is a life of meaning. If what your character strength is connected to something bigger than you, and that is something extremely important. Oftentimes we have all these gifts and all these strengths that we are not necessarily sharing with our community. And so it's very important that we have this 3-part formula. Oftentimes we have lots of people that have a life of meaning, and they're giving to the community, and they're connected to the community, and they're doing what they love, but they don't have a lot of pleasure in their life. They don't enjoy the simple things. They're not with their family. They're not with, they're not spending the birthdays with their friends. This is really about how it's so important for you to be balanced in this 3-part formula. You do need pleasure, and pleasure can mean, like I said, anything in your life. Number 2, you do need to be exercising what is your strength, because you will live inauthentically if you are not practicing your character strength. And number 3, it is about engaging with the community in some way and connecting it to something bigger than just you and your family. Okay, so this is the 3-part formula, and that is essential to authentic happiness. And that's why when they asked me to speak about something, I said I would love to speak about values, because a life devoid of values is a hedonistic life. It's going from pleasure to pleasure to pleasure, and the next holiday to the next, outfit to the next purse to the next something. And that's what we go from pleasure to pleasure to pleasure. And it's like a hedonistic cycle that you're engaged in, trying to get a sense of happiness out of things. And you will never, ever get that authentic, real, like a solid sense of happiness from that outside space. Happiness is an inside job, guys. And so here I am telling you about how you can actually do that. And so one of the values that is so essential for happiness is generosity. And I picked this, there's a lot of different values, but I picked this value to speak about first because we are in Ramadan and this is a month of generosity. So what better time to speak about generosity than this? However, if I speak to most people, they will talk about, oh, I sent food to the poor, or I sent money to the poor, or I gave zakah, or I gave charity, or I gave sadaqah, and this is how they think about generosity. They don't think about generosity beyond any of this. And so what is generosity? I would like to speak to you about a few things today, right? So I spoke to you about the importance of values for those of you who are just joining. Number 2, I will tell you about what generosity is and what generosity is not. And then I would like to speak about why it's so important to be generous for our happiness and our mental and physical health. And then I'd like to give you some ways where you can start practicing that. Because we are what we repeatedly do, as Aristotle said. And what we do becomes who we are. And so if you are not being generous every single day, then that is not something you are exercising every single day. And so how is it that I can be generous? Most often when we think about generosity, we are thinking about money. or food or something, right? But what about when we give of our time? What about when we give of ourself, our talent? There was somebody recently who messaged me on Instagram, and they said that, listen, I would love to help you create a podcast. I'm a great sort of, recording tech person, and it would be great if Lighthouse had a podcast. And that's them being generous with their talent. Are you generous with your time? So often we're scrolling down something and someone is talking to us. That is not a generous way of listening. And some have even said, hi everybody who just joined, some have even said that generosity, the greatest generosity that we can do for people at this time is to give them a sense that we are with them, we are listening to them. And no matter how many times I've heard this story, I'll still laugh every time you tell it, or I'll still be engaged every time you tell it. That is generosity. Sometimes it's easy to give money. Sometimes it's easy to give time. But what about your attention? That is true generosity, is to expand it beyond what you have and becomes who you are. So think about that when I talk about generosity. It's about listening. It's about attention. It's about your time. It's about your talent. And then it's also about the way you interpret people's actions. That's called generosity of interpretation, or charity of interpretation. I don't like charity of interpretation, but generosity of interpretation. What do I mean by that? So if my friend comes and said, I see her and she gives me this sort of look and she sort of walks away, and I look at her and I say, oh my God, this person, like, she's my friend. How is she looking at me this way? And I immediately go, oh, she's such, I really never liked her anyways. And why is she acting like this to me? Who does she think she is? That is not generosity of interpretation. Generosity of interpretation is when I look at someone and they give me the look of death, and they give me a dirty look, and I say, she probably couldn't see me. Maybe she was thinking about something, or maybe she was having a bad day. And I make excuses for their negative behavior. That's called generosity of interpretation. And there are not many people who can do that. Forgiveness, which is going to be one of the values I speak about next week. Forgiveness is actually an act of generosity. When you forgive someone, when they cannot give you something, which is an apology, right? Generosity is when we give to people something that they don't have, something maybe they don't deserve, something that they cannot get. What about forgiveness? Most people will not actually give forgiveness because they will give all of their money, but my God, I will not forgive my sister-in-law, or I will not forgive, my uncle or whoever because of what they did to me. That is not generosity. So I want you to know that when we talk about a sort of miserly person, or when we speak about generosity, I'm speaking in a very broad term. And the feeling, the state that I'm talking about is being tender. Being tender with your belongings, being tender with the people in your life that, maybe they're being harsh with you, but you're still choosing to be kind and soft with them even when they don't deserve it. That's generosity. Now you're saying, why should I be doing this? This is like, why is this lady telling me that I should be practicing generosity when, this person wronged me, or I don't have that much time and I don't want to give of anything else other than what is, easy for me. I'm still being generous. Yeah, okay, fine, you're being generous. However, it is so good for you to be generous. It's actually like you looking after your health. So generosity will help your cortisol levels drop. Cortisol is the stress hormone. All of us are living on cortisol at this point, and a lot of us have a lot of different stress hormone inside of us. Cortisol is dropped. your blood pressure drops, your cholesterol drops, you're able to handle stress, the inflammation in your body drops, the immunoglobulin A, which is literally linked to your immunity, actually increases. Giving and the act of giving is actually so good for you. There's all kinds of research done where there was one research done, for example, I think at Harvard, where they gave people money and they said, we're going to give you money. Do you predict that you will be happier if you spend it on yourself or if you give it to someone else? This is just about money because it's an easier thing to measure as a psychologist. And they said, I think I'll be happier if I spend it on myself. And they found that the people that spent it on someone else were actually a whole lot happier than people that spent it on themselves. And the happiness actually lingered. How many times have you gone out and you bought something and then like a couple days later it was just something, another thing that you have on your shelves or another thing you have in your jewelry box or in your garage or something? We get habituated when we buy for ourselves. However, when we give to someone else of our time, of our talent, of our interpretation, of our money, of our belongings, that happiness lasts a whole lot longer and it lingers on beyond that, beyond the time of giving. Another thing that, so that's generosity and why it's good for us. Now, let me tell you what generosity is not, because many times people think that they're being generous. However, there's like an underlying hidden agenda. And there's a few things that generosity actually is not. So there's a thing called codependency. We say that a person who is seeking someone's approval, that is not generosity. So, for example, I could be doing something again and again and again for my mother, but I'm actually looking for her to say, oh, you're a good daughter, or oh, you are, a good person. And that seeking of approval actually takes away from the good benefits of generosity. So when you are generous and when you are giving of your time or your talent or your love or your interpretation, that means you don't expect anything in return from that person. So true generosity comes without interpretation. It comes without you saying, what am I going to get in return for this? Or how come she didn't even say thank you? So one way people are generous is when they try, what generosity is not is when you give in order to get something in return. And a lot of times we get a lot of people that are giving and giving and giving, and it's almost pathological because they want something in return. And the biggest sign of that is actually when you are resentful. So when you feel resentful that no one takes care of me, or no one loves me the way I love them, or no one gives back to me the way I give to them, that is not generosity. That's you working on some sort of pathological sort of wound that you're working through. There's a person here, Reem, that's exactly right. Intention is everything. And I know that, in the Islamic faith, we say that without intention, the action becomes a bit nullified. And so what is your intention? Are you doing it for your higher power, for your higher good, for God, whichever language you like to use? Or are you doing it because you want a thank you or you want a pat on the back? That is not generosity. That's like some sort of emotional, psychological wound playing out, okay? So that's one. Number two is when people do it for control. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say that, oh, my father gives me this and then he expects me to do exactly what he wants. Or I give my son this because I expect him to do exactly what I want. So sure, I'll pay for your college education, but you will study exactly what I want. That controlling behavior is not generosity. Generosity is giving to the other person without expectation. Number three, when we give with some sort of motive, oh, maybe I'll look good in the eyes of that person, or maybe if I give, people will think of me as a generous person, or maybe if I give, then I will have better self-esteem. That again, there's still some sort of connection linked to why is it that you're giving. When you give to the other person and you feel the other person and you feel their pain and you feel what they might need, that, and then you act out of that place, is a very different sort of action and reaction, and the sense that you get inside of you, than if you are doing it from a place of what am I going to get in return. And then lastly, I think when we give too much, I do see this a lot. I see that there's a lot of people that almost don't know their own boundaries, and it's so important that you have some boundaries around that, because if you give someone too much of something, they might feel overwhelmed. They might feel indebted. They might not feel very good. They might feel that, how am I ever going to repay this person? And so it has to be, we talk about the middle path. There should be a middle path. You don't give too little, you don't give too much, you give just right. And it should be with the other person in mind, because it can be very overwhelming to get something so big, and it's like, how am I ever going to repay that? And that person no longer feels joy when they receive something, they actually feel stress. So the giving has to be with the other person in mind. The giving has to be with you leaving your shoes and getting out of your shoes and getting into someone else's. That's what generosity truly is to feel the other person, to see what they want, and then actually give them that. All right, so now we've talked about what generosity is. We've talked about what generosity is not. And now I want to talk about what you can do in order for you to be more generous. But before I do that, I think I'd like to say that it's, I'd like to go back, or actually rewind a little bit about values and why am I talking about this for people who just joined. We are living in a world which is super, super connected. We are connected to each other, and God knows where all you people are from, and I'm so happy that you all are here with me. But the relationship is not happening because we are not opening up our ears, and we're not opening up our eyes, and we're not opening up our hearts. And so we're relating and connecting on a very superficial level. And that superficial level is what is leading to a lot of loneliness inside of us. And so what I'm here to say for the next couple of weeks is that a life devoid of values is a life that is going to lead to a sense of loneliness, to a sense of depression, to a sense of sadness. And that in order for you to live a truly meaningful, authentic life, you must engage with people and yourself on a different level. And so there's a lot of we have these ideas that, I have 700 friends, or I have 7,000 followers, or I have. And we actually don't think about, how many people did I listen to with my heart today? Or how many people did I see truly for who they are today? And that is authentic happiness. And that's why I'm talking about generosity. So for those of you who joined and they're thinking, why is this lady talking about authentic happiness or generosity on the Happiness Ministry, I would like to remind that it really is about living a life of values, guys. It's about living your authentic character strengths. And like I said, I'm going to put that on my Instagram stories right after this as to where you can take your character strengths assessment. It's a free assessment. You go online and it tells you what your character strengths are, and then it tells you all the things you need to work on. I told you guys about the things that are my strengths. My virtue, the things that I need to be working on are patience. And so I'd like to, patience and temperance and not impulsivity and these kinds of things. And so I just gave you guys my secrets about what I need to be working on and what are my growth edges. But it's so, so important. And like I said, guys, you're listening to me right now, and you can listen to me, and that's great. But I think it's some saying in Arabic that a person who has knowledge but has no action, it's like a donkey carrying books. And so listen and engage and learn, but then sit down and write down what you're going to do about it. And that's what I want to talk about next. And I'm going to just pull out a piece of paper so I can remember what I wrote. What can we do about being more generous? First, I want you to do just a little bit of assessment. Take out your journal and start writing. I want you to write down about who are the generous people in your life. I have a friend, and she is so generous. And I never actually knew generosity until I met her. Sitting there and listening, and I'm, right? And so the space that she created for me to just talk, that was generous. However, there were times where I would lose it, right? We all lose it. We're all human, including us psychologists. And I would really lose my temper, or I would lose my way, or I'd be agitated, or I would be restless, or I would be angry, or I'd be irritable. And nothing changed. And there was generosity of interpretation. She saw the whole of me. She saw that I was good, and then I was not so good sometimes, and then there was things that I needed to work on. But she loved all of me. Accepting another person is generosity. Saying, yeah, they're not so good sometimes, and they're so great sometimes, and amazing other times. Seeing the whole person, and not just saying, I'll be your friend if you're good to me, or I'll be your friend if you make me feel good. That is not generous. So that is not forgiving. And so I have this friend who taught me. I felt like, how is this even real? Before that, I will tell you that if someone was good to me, I would be good to them. If someone wasn't good to me, okay, well, you're lost, and I'd be on my way. She taught me that you are good, period. You are generous, period. You listen, period. That's it. And so notice people in your life. That's first thing. And write down things that you like about this person. It could be a person in history, or it could be a person in your life. It could be a person who is living or a person who has passed. But notice the things that you loved about that person, and notice what you feel inside of you. That would be the first thing. Number two, I want you to notice what is easy for you to give. Because there are some things that are easier than others. For some people, giving of their time. I'll give you my time, but my God, if I have to give you my money, heck no, I am not doing that. Because, oh my God, they have this fear inside of them. And I think underneath generosity, underneath it lies a deep trust that there will be more, and there will always be more. So there will be more time, and there will be more love, and there will be more money. And so underneath that is trust. Trust in the universe, trust in God, trust in yourself, that there will be more. It's okay. And so how do I create that level of trust? So what is easy for you to give? Write that down. Number two, this is number three. Number three, I want you to ask yourself, what is hard for you to give? Because there will be some things that are harder for you than other things. Time may be harder. Distracted emotions or attention may be harder. We live in a very, very frenzied world. Yes, Reem, you are reading my mind. Scarcity versus abundance. Reem, I hope we do connect. But yes, we are definitely aligned there. Reem is saying abundance versus scarcity mindset. An abundant mindset is there is enough for everyone, and there is more for everyone, and there's more for me. And if I give to someone, I will be no less than what I was before I gave. But the scarcity mindset starts off with there's a limited amount of money, there's a limited amount of time, and I don't have that much to give. And that's the difference between the scarcity mindset and the abundance mindset. And so how is it that we can have an abundance mindset? But that requires you to have a deep trust in the higher power, a deep trust that everything is going to be okay, and that for whatever I give, there may be 100-fold in return, but I'm not looking for return, right? We need to remember it's not about the return in this life, or it's not about the return right away. Who knows what happens in the future? Maybe it shows up in your kid's life, or maybe it shows up in something else. We don't know how it's going to show up for us. So that was number 3, I think. Number 4, I'd like to say that write down the areas of your life, right? Write down work and your relationships and your community, and write down what you are doing to be generous in that time. So Benjamin Franklin, he was an American president. He's on the $100 bill. Benjamin Franklin was really serious about his life of virtues and character, right? He believed we are what we repeatedly do. And we are what we repeatedly do. And he took that very, very seriously. So he had a journal. And in that journal, he would write down the character strength that he was working on. So let's just say he was working on kindness. And so he wrote down kindness, and he wrote down every single day of the week. And then he said, Monday, any acts of kindness, he would document. Tuesday, any acts of kindness, he would document. Wednesday. And that way, he knows when he's being kind and when he's not. Because remember, guys, what we measure, we can actually change. If we don't know what we're working with, you can never actually change it. And so if you are working on generosity, I want you to put generosity, and then I want you to put Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then I want you to see how many acts of generosity did you do that day. It's so important for you to keep track of these things. And I use paper and pencil most of the time, but I'm sure that there's some app for this. You cannot manage what you don't measure. So measure these character strengths. Remember, I'll say it again, we are what we repeatedly do. And if you are doing generosity, then you are generous. We can all have this idea of, oh, I'm a generous person and I'm an honest person, because that's what we want to believe, because it would be too horrible for me to understand that I could be a lying person or I could be an ungenerous person. But what are you actually doing in your life that is honest or generous or kind or giving or forgiving? How many times have you actually done that today? How many times has someone upset you and you said, you know what? I'm gonna let that one go because he was probably in a bad mood. Generosity, write it down. This is what we need to be sort of thinking about. You need to track it. And then lastly, guys, I would like to say that no value is complete without it being exercised on our own self. No value, nothing is complete without us first filling our own cup. And I know I wrote about this yesterday, sorry guys for those who read it, is that even when we are in relationships, if we don't love ourselves first, if we are not generous with ourselves first, if we are not kind to ourselves first, then we will seek that from another person. Because imagine you have a cup and we need this much filled. We all have human needs, right? We have this many human needs. And if I'm not meeting my needs, guess where I'm gonna wanna get my needs met? I'm gonna go to all the people in my life and say, you need to make me feel good. You need to make me feel loved. You need to give me something. You need to make me feel loved or feel like I'm full. But if I'm filling my own cup first, if I'm loving myself first, if I'm generous with myself first, then I have a whole lot more to give. It's like the oxygen mask where we say, well, not we say, but on the airlines when we used to travel and when we will travel again, when we hear, in times of stress, you will have the oxygen mask drop. If you are with the elderly or the young, make sure that you put your mask on first. Why? is because if you're trying to put the mask on first, trying to be a martyr and trying to give to others because you're a giving person, but you haven't given to yourself first, guess what's going to happen? You're going to pass out, and then the elderly and the young are not going to have anyone to sort of work or help them. So you must give to yourself first. You must fill your own cup so you are better for other people. As a mother of 4 children and a wife and a business owner and a psychologist who is in a caregiving profession, it is an obligation that I have. It's an obligation to every mother, to every parent, to every daughter, to every son, that they take care of themselves first. They fill their own cup. And that might be that, you know what? I go for a walk quietly in the morning, or I get a good night rest, or I take 15 minutes by myself in between my workday and when I have to go hang out with my family at dinner. That's whatever it takes, just fill that cup drop by drop. It doesn't have to be big things, but you must be generous with yourself, guys. And that generosity is not just, like I said, with time, but it also is with interpretation. Are you being kind to yourself? Or when you make a mistake, which is, something that I'm doing a lot more of when I have to homeschool 4 children, am I thinking, oh my God, I'm such a bad teacher, or oh my God, my children are gonna fail and it's all my fault? Am I talking like that to myself? Or am I saying, you know what? We're all gonna do the best we can right now, because that's all we got, because no one's ever been here before and no one will probably ever be here again. But this is what we're doing. And the most important thing is that there's love and there's light and there's, joy in our homes. And you know what? If they don't learn everything they're supposed to learn, they might learn at some point, hopefully in the future. Are you being kind with yourself? Are you being generous with yourself? So it's so important to do that before you try and go off and be generous to other people, because sometimes that's easier. Sometimes we're a whole lot harder on ourselves than we are on other people. And the voice inside has to be a kind one. And then you go off and try to be generous to other people. So I think I spoke to you guys now about the importance of values. I talked about what generosity is. I talked about what generosity is not. I also talked about why it's important for us to be generous, how good it is for our happiness, how good it is for our well-being and our physical health and our mental health. And then I talked about what are things that you can start doing and make sure that you're starting to track. I would love to hear from all of you guys and in ways where we're being generous. And even this idea of pay it forward is, don't say it, just give it without any return. They don't have to pay it forward if they don't want. Because there's oftentimes we have this idea of, oh, I'll be kind, and then someone says, how do I pay that back to you? And you say, pay it forward. Don't say that, actually. I mean, it's fine if you do, but you can just say, this is for you and you're welcome and God bless you, and that's it. And so I want you to start sort of relating to generosity in a way literally that is without any expectation. And when we are listening, so let's just say there's, I remember I read a book and it was like really life-changing, and I don't remember the name of the book, but it was like all these little quotes, and I think I was like 12 years old at that time. And I remember that there was a quote about a 12 or 13-year-old boy, or maybe he was younger actually, and he said, and he was like a rich person or famous person at that time, and he said, I remember that when I had $1, I thought, how can I give away 50 cents? So remember, guys, when it comes to generosity, when it comes to giving of your things, you do not have to be wealthy in order for you to give. Start teaching your kids at a very young age. What I usually do with my children, that when they get a sum of money, we split it into 3. 1, we save, because you should, because right now we don't live in a world that really believes in saving. But 1, we save. 2, we give. We give to someone who needs it more than us. And number 3, we spend it. Because that really is the 3-part formula, right? You're thinking about your future, you're keeping something, you're being frugal, which is another value, you're giving to someone who doesn't have enough, and then you're still spending it on yourself. It's okay to spend on yourself, but make sure that you're doing the other part. So this is something that you can do for your kids. I literally have 3 jars where you can drop money in, and this is how it's divided anytime they get money. Anytime they get a gift, for their birthday, if there's gifts that they get, it would be a 3-part formula. You give 1/3 of your gifts, you put 1/3 of your gifts away for later because we won't keep buying these things, and then 1/3 you can actually open and you can enjoy at this time. So it's a great formula to have, and that way you can sort of live a full life regardless of whatever you do. And I'm coming to the end of my time with you guys today, so I would love to have some questions for you. Do it wholeheartedly. You know, this is something that I need to work on, and I'm working on it, and it's really, really, really hard that, you know, listening to someone and being fully present with that person, our ears, our heart, our eyes, without distractions, turning off your phone, putting it in the drawer, putting it in your purse or away from you, and saying, I'm with you, and I've got you, and I'm listening to you, and no matter what you say, I'll still hear you. That is so, so important. So no matter what you give, if it's your time, if it's your money, if it's your talent, don't give with something in return. Give without distraction. That's hard. Give without expectation. Give wholeheartedly. Be present wholeheartedly. And then don't give with this sort of feeling of resentment inside of you that, oh, no one takes care of me. How come I'm giving everything and no one's giving to me? Don't do that. Just give, and eventually it will come back. That's just the law of the universe. What you put out comes right back to you in some way or another. You just don't know how it might be showing up in your life. And there's a quote by, and I've written it down here, by Ferrucci. He wrote a book on kindness, and he said, when you are generous, you do not spare yourself. So when you are generous with your love and your time and your attention, do not spare any part of yourself. So I want you all to start practicing some of this. I want you to please tell me the impact it's having on you and the ways you are being generous. I would love, because that's one thing, by the way, I forgot to mention this, that while the coronavirus is contagious, guess what's more contagious? Generosity. Research shows it that when we see other people be generous, we are going to be generous. When we see other people afraid, we are going to be afraid. When we see other people anxious, we are going to be. So what are you going to spread, right? What are you going to be sort of the, patient zero about, or maybe not patient, but person zero, where you go out and you spread love and generosity and kindness and, good sort of emotions. That is super, super contagious. And that's why most often, even in the Islamic faith, it says when your left hand gives or when your right hand gives, the left hand shouldn't know, unless you can sort of inspire someone. And that is why you should tell people when you are giving, because it might inspire them. And that really goes well for, by the way, for people who are, for parents. So if you are giving to the poor and you are giving of your time, talk about that at dinner. Hey, listen guys, there's a person who came to me and he asked for something, or my friend, he was really upset today and I sat with him for the 1 hour and I listened to him. Tell them that, because there is a modeling effect that happens and there is a contagion that happens even with generosity. So I hope this was helpful for you. I would love to take some questions for you, from you guys right now, if there are any questions. A lot of different highlights. Next week, I'm going to be talking about forgiveness, which is super hard for us. I'm working on that as well, regardless of our psychological state and our our sort of maturity with age, forgiveness is extremely difficult as human beings for all of us, including myself. And so I'll share with you some of my stories then, and I would love to hear from you as to what else you want us to speak about. So somebody asked, what are your favorite acts of generosity? My favorite act of generosity is really when someone listens. And I think that I need to work on myself as a listener, even though I'm a psychologist, but I get sometimes a little bit excited and they share something and then I want to share something and I might interrupt them. And so for me, it's really like when someone deeply listens to me and they're listening with their heart, oof, it's like life-changing. It can transform a human being. So if I could just say that, guys, you know, if you could give someone that, even the most poorest person, if you listen to them and you listen to their story and you listen to what they have to say and their emotions and their words, it is the biggest act of love and generosity. I'm going to look at some other questions. So what are the methods of self-discovering your values? So if you go, and I'm going to see if I can type it on here, guys. This is my Instagram account. I forgot to put it as a pin. This is my Instagram account. And I promise you, I will put on the link. I think that's it. I will put on a link to the values inventory, and that's a great way for you to start looking at what your values are and what your signature strengths are and what your signature sort of areas of work are. Like I said, my signature strength is curiosity and love of learning and wisdom and these kinds of values. And humanity is also one of them. And then if I'm exercising those values most of the day, every day, I'm gonna have a good life and I'm gonna be in a state of flow. And then my areas of growth happen to all be around patience. I'm not a very patient person. So I'm working on it. I swear. Another question is, so sometimes we feel like people are taking advantage of our generosity. So that statement cannot happen in a truly sort of generous person. If I feel I'm a generous person, I give without any expectation. And I give as much as I can give, right? Even in giving, there is the middle path. Even in the Islamic religion, or any religion actually, they will say that in giving there is a middle path. Don't give too little, don't give too much. If you feel people are taking you for granted, you probably are giving more than you are giving to yourself in that moment. You have to take care of your own house. This is your house, your mental house, your physical house, your emotional house. You need to take care of your own house before you start off by giving to someone else. And so if you feel people are taking you for granted, then that is not generosity. That is you expecting that they will not take you for granted, or that they will say thank you, or that they will stop at some point. But underneath that tells me that you need to take care of your own self first. So that's what I would probably answer to that question. The question is, how do you forgive yourself? The way you would forgive anyone else, really. It's the same exact way. Giving yourself the benefit of doubt. You know, I think Maya Angelou said this, that you do the best you can, and when you know better, you do better. I don't know a single person on the planet who has lived a life that they can say it was without fault and it without, you know, any issues. And that no one knows that, no one does that, right? And so we all make mistakes. And then I think it's very important to deconstruct that mistake and say, what did I learn from it? Who did I hurt? What did I not want to do again? What made me do those things? I think there's lessons in that. And when you take the lesson out of it, then you actually become super grateful for even that mistake. I remember there was a period in my life where I made many mistakes, and I actually, when I reflected back on those mistakes, I am who I am because of that mistake. And so I feel grateful that I made those mistakes. I learned what not to do. I learned that it didn't feel good when I acted like that. I learned that this is what happens when I don't act with patience and when I'm impulsive. So when you deconstruct the mistake, then it becomes a lesson. Then it becomes experience. Then it becomes wisdom. It's no longer a mistake. A mistake is what you just keep doing and you keep doing and you haven't thought it through. Deconstruct it, learn from it, learn about yourself, be honest with yourself. It's important for you to say, you know, every time this person shows up, I'm hot-headed, or every time I haven't done this, I feel very agitated. It's important to be super, super honest with yourself when you are deconstructing mistakes, to become lessons and to become wisdom. So somebody suggesting, hello. So someone says, how do you become more empathetic? So human beings, generally speaking, we are all very empathetic if we pay attention. And they've done all sorts of research where they showed people, even, they said even lawyers, which I'm not sure why they said it that way. In some of the research, they showed all sorts of people, even just a 90-second clip of, someone talking about their child who is recovering from cancer and someone who's suffering in another way. Human beings, we get activated when we see suffering. It's just mirror neurons. If I see suffering, suffering gets triggered inside of me, and then I move to fix that suffering. We are wired, and evolutionarily speaking, our wiring is that of empathy and compassion, because we belong in social groups, and I don't want to suffer. And when I see you suffer, and I know many of you probably have felt someone get hurt and then you feel the pain, that's mirror neurons. And so when we see someone suffering, we actually suffer ourselves. And so if you feel that you feel a little bit disconnected to your physical sense of pain, go look for people that are suffering. And I promise you, you will feel empathetic. It's very, very hard for us to sit with people that are suffering. And sometimes I feel that we live in a world where we are disconnected from people's suffering. We don't hear their pain. Sometimes you might hear a story on social media, or you might see a movie or something on a news clip, and we see that, oh, this person might be suffering. But have you sat with pain? Have you sat with someone who lost someone to death? Have you given and physically handed to someone who didn't have food and you're feeding them? That is opening up the parts of you that are empathetic. I would like to say that as a culture, as a world, we are becoming less and less empathetic, in the sense that we are very, very self-absorbed. Social media and, I this and I that and iPhone and iMessage and I has become very, very sort of, we've become very self-focused. And so move out of that space and go be with people, and you will feel that connection and you will feel that empathy get triggered right away. Who is your favorite generous person? Like I said, my friend who really has been my inspiration when it comes to how do I love people, how do I listen to people, she was my inspiration. So I'm very, very, very grateful for her. So that's my most favorite person. But I'm sure that there's many others in my life, but there's this one friend who gave herself to me. She gave me her heart, her ears, her eyes, her soul, her mind. Every single time I went to her. And for me, that was everything. And that was the most important sort of act of generosity, life-changing, really. When someone asked, what about forgive but never forget? I don't know why. I think, but I don't know why. I have a very bad memory when it comes to like these kinds of things. So I actually forget when people hurt me. But forgive and let it go. You know, I'm going to talk about forgiveness next week, so I'm not going to give too much of that away. But please come back next week and ask me that same question. And I would love to mention what I actually believe about this forgive, not forget. I'm going to write this down so I make sure that I mention it in the next week talk. I've written it down and I will mention it, so stay tuned. All right. Yes. How to become a patient person when you're angry. I can definitely answer that. And I think I have like literally 2 more minutes, but that will be the end. And I will be back next week, guys. So how do you become more patient as an angry person? So first, I spoke about this on my Instagram account where we talk about ruler. It is about recognizing your emotions, labeling your emotions, understanding your emotions. This is not just about suppression or denial of your anger. You have to understand all of that. That's like somebody comes and gives you a message, and all emotions are messengers. All they are is messengers from beyond that are telling you something is not right, something is not what you want it to be. And so if we understand our emotions, they usually chill out and they calm down. So recognizing, understanding, labeling, expressing, regulating is part of a formula when we talk about managing your emotions. And I hope to talk more about that at some point in the future, if not on this channel, but maybe on mine. But this is not about managing your anger. And at this point, I would say there were times in my life where I had literally zero, even if I understood emotions or even if I could control, I just ran out of the room. I literally hit the eject button and I said, there's no way I can control my anger right now, so I'm just going to leave the situation. And if that's all you can do right now, do that, just so you don't do any harm. So do no harm, run out of the room, and then I want you to journal. What happened before? What happened during? What was going on inside of you at that time? Were you hungry? Were you lonely? Were you tired? Was the other person triggering you? Were you feeling defensive? Get to understand yourself a little bit. I would love to talk on and on and on about this. But anger and sadness and disappointment and anxiety, all of these emotions are actually messengers from beyond that are telling you something is important to you and that you need to pay attention. I always say, imagine that the emotions are like, Deliveroo. You listen to them, you don't sort of invite them in and have tea with them, but you listen to the emotion, you understand it, you look at it, you pay attention, and then you send it off. Because that's what we need. We need to make informed decisions about our life, about our values, what is important to us, based off of our emotions. Remember, guys, our neocortex and our language is the last thing that evolved in us. We are sensory beings. We feel things, and that is how we used to communicate. And so it's very, very important that we stay connected to that sensory experience. We pay attention to that. And then we use that sensory experience to guide us into living a more authentic life. So we went off a little bit off topic, but it's all related. But this topic was about generosity. Remember, guys, as the quote says, spare nothing when it comes to giving of yourself, when it comes to your attention and your time and your love. It's abundant. It's endless when it comes to just how much love you can give to people. And I promise you, the return on that investment is immense. And you will feel better, you will feel less stressed, you will feel more purposeful, you will feel happier. And it will be an authentic happiness that comes from a very, very deep place. And it does become addictive. There is something called the helper's high, and you become a little bit addicted to that. And so I look forward to seeing you guys again next week at 5 p.m. Okay? Take care of yourself. Thank you, and Ramadan Mubarak. And I hope you have a good iftar and take care of yourselves and each other.